Morning, Kelly.
It was fine.
Not good. That's scary.
Yeah. Okay, 9 o'clock, we'll get started so we can on our way. Just a couple of things here. This meeting is also done on interactive video. And Commissioner Matt Ludwig will be participating using that method. And he's doing that interactive tele pursuant to Minnesota statute 13D.02. Commissioner Ludwig will be seen and heard at the meeting by electronic means and participating from Staybridge Suites 2350 Commerce Drive, Northwest Rochester, Minnesota. Location that is open and accessible to the public. Public is invited to participate dialing in or video. Anyway, we will call the meeting to order and we'll rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, first on our agenda is talk with townships. We have invited people. I'm assuming you folks are from one of the townships? Windermere? Awesome. So if you have any issues, what we found out is sometimes when we travel around the county, people are more apt to come to a meeting and say, you know, this has been bugging us for about 13 years and it's an easy fix. And sometimes it's not an easy fix, but we do like to communicate with you guys and we try to do that. This meeting was going to be held in Bruno, but due to some COVID restrictions stuff, we moved it here. So you got anything on your mind that we could help you with or you could help us with? Yeah.
Mark Tanaski again from Windermere Township. I don't have any complaints, but I do want to thank the board for passing the motion to give the township $25,000 for that high water study on Sturgeon Lake. There's a lot of people on Sturgeon Lake here over the past several years. We're very grateful that the water is down this year, obviously, and people are a lot happier. But the same thing happened in 1972, where water went down and nobody did anything about it, and all of a sudden it came back. And so we are going to use that money to actually move forward with that feasibility study to at least have something in our back pocket in case the situation arises again. So I just want to publicly thank the board for moving forward with that.
Thank you. And thank JJ for bringing that forward. So that's what we have to do. If you guys got something, you bring it to your local commissioner and we get it on our agenda and we can see if we can do something about it. But you got a heck of a memory if you remember something that happened in 1972.
And Mr. Chair, could I just ask for the name of the gentleman who was speaking for the record?
Pardon me, sir?
Your name?
Mark Danaski.
Mark Danaski? Thank you.
Thanks for coming. How's everything else in Windermere?
I'll speak again as long as the sheriff's office here.
Can we get you to come speak in the mic so that Matt can hear you? Please.
Just a quick question, I guess. I'm wondering.
I can hear him just fine.
Okay, I'm just wondering, one of our vehicles, our pickup truck, our one-ton pickup truck had it's not a catalytic converter, but whatever they use on diesels had it stolen right in our parking lot. And I'm just wondering how, is that coming across the county now?
It is. It's state and probably nationwide the way it sounds. We actually just arrested the guy yesterday for the third or fourth time for having possession of stolen catalytic converters. So hopefully he'll be out of the system for a day or two. And unfortunately, he had to let his friend go that was in the car with him. So we do know some of the people involved, but they are really transient as well. So it's a little difficult. But yeah, I think last week we had 5 go from north to south. So it's hard because it's so quick and easy. And they're really hard to put back to the owner because they're not serial number. So,
Who buys them, Jeff?
rumor has it there's a place out of Superior that'll buy them without any ID or any problems. That's the rumor anyways.
Because they're obviously worth something or people wouldn't
Yep.
think they should steal them.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I do know that the industry right now is in the process of changing a bunch of stuff. So they are tagging them, marking them. A lot of scrapyards won't take them no more unless, even if a guy is legitimately scrapping them, they have to leave an ID and stuff like that. So they're really clamping down on it right now, but.
Everyone locally, as far as I know, is reporting to us when they get some that are at least suspicious. So I think locally they're working well with us. But again, rumor has it there's a place in Wisconsin that will take them. So.
thanks for highlighting that. It's an issue in our neighborhood and in Pine City. I know that there's a little car lot that I drive by every day going to coffee. And somebody crawled under a whole bunch of vehicles there last spring. And I mean, it's devastating for a guy with a small car lot to lose. I don't know what did he lose, Jeff? 8 or 10 in one night?
Yeah, a bunch.
Bunch anyway. How's fishing on Sturgeon Lake?
Sunfish are good.
But
And if you like bass,
yeah. Anyway, anything else? Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Got anything to add or?
Mr. Chair, if we could change the order of the agenda so that the opioid settlement and the budget discussion switch places, so the opioid settlement is last. I'm thinking that the public may be interested in the budget discussion, and if we don't make them stay through the closed meeting portion, that might be helpful. And then on the opioid settlement, we've added additional information on the process to close the meeting based on the attorney-client privilege. And then additional information in the packet includes PowerPoint slides and a 2022 budget memo.
All right. Oh. We will, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda as.
I can make that motion.
Ludwig will move as amended.
We'll let you second it, Matt. I think JJ.
Oh, okay. Oh, yep. Sorry.
Any discussion? If not, Debbie, you want to call the roll?
Sure. District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren.
Aye.
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to the strategic plan update.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, there is a one-page handout in the packet that summarizes the goals from January that the county board set, and then a quick status update. And the first two, economic development and increased broadband access, are going to be covered by Leslie later during the meeting, so I'm just going to skip over those. The county attorney office workload, I know that was discussed as part of the budget process, and the county attorney did share the workload that he has, but I think there was a consensus not to add staff at this time. The wetland bank development, this has been several years in the making. And I think, or at least I know my conclusion is that getting wetland credit for preserving wetlands is not an easy or likely task. And so the alternative is to create wetlands, which is expensive, risky, and complicated. And so I think at this point, this might be a goal that we should maybe reevaluate the direction on. And the primary driver that it made our goal list was the idea that developers may be having trouble doing development to mitigate the wetlands and there were no credits available to purchase in the region. And I think now that Leslie is on board, we'll be able to get some clearer feedback on exactly what those holdups might be and then address them as we go along. So I guess I'm thinking this may not be a top priority at this time. The sales tax for transportation, the county board did extend the sales tax or renew the sales tax to December 31st, 2035, or the collection of $17.4 million. And so that one, I think, is accomplished. The sheriff's office staffing, we've had, I think, a significant amount of conversation on that. And there was approval to add a 4th sergeant position to the sheriff's office and to implement a hire ahead process to reduce the duration of vacancies. There is a request for a lieutenant position, and later in the meeting, you'll see that made my cut list. And so certainly commissioners are the arbitrator of that. But that is where we stand on that item. Solid waste and dumping. We do have grant and bond funds to construct a household hazardous waste facility in Willow River, and we anticipate that construction will start spring of 2022. And Sandstone, the memorandum of agreement expires November of this year. And Caleb is actively working to get a 3-year extension, and we think that is a likely outcome. Outdoor recreation and trails, we do have the $650,000 of bonding, and we are working with the DNR on the final routing of that and getting that project to fruition. And the planned construction of that would be 2024. And then we are working with Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures for figuring out how to get the trail landing into Hinckley and through Hinckley to connect to the existing trail. And then reestablish local government officials meetings. That was the attempt today to meet in Bruno, or to get part of that reestablished, and then also creating our 2 or 3 times a year of inviting all the local government officials in. I think at this point, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern based on the apparent increase in the virus. The 2022 levy, so I think that'll be later in this meeting. And then the pandemic response lessons learned. I think we have made progress on the remote work, additional flexibility. Video meetings have been normalized for many staff and external meetings, so people aren't necessarily having to drive to St. Paul or St. Cloud or Duluth for an hour-long meeting. And then we have a more robust electronic document management, which I think is been helpful for a lot of departments. So there's my kind of one over the world on all those, but certainly this is an opportunity for the board to give direction, to discuss, next steps or what they might want to see on any of these or other goals.
Well, I just want to report on the being able to meet remotely. I sit on the Central Minnesota Workforce Board, and normally I'd have to drive to Monticello for an hour meeting on a Friday afternoon. And I did what I had to do, came in, put a clean shirt on, sat down at my dining room table at 10 after 12. The meeting started at 12:15. We were done before 1:15, and I could go about my day. It was Monticello, you can't get there from here. You go, it's a 90-mile trek, and on all, you drive 5 miles and you got to stop and turn, and I just hate it. And so I think we got everything we would have had we been in person. We have kind of agreed to do a couple of year in-person meetings going forward, but this is our new normal for that board, at least. Terry?
Yeah, the health department, they're talking about getting back into person, but then there's so much fear with the viruses that it keeps getting postponed. So I'm smiling. It would be nice to meet people in person.
It is, but if we were just chatting before the meeting, if everybody is remote, things work really, really well. if you're the only guy remote, it's a little bit harder. As Matt could attest to probably, but it's better than the alternative, and the alternative is either not going to the meeting at all or spending a half a day on the road for a 1 hour meeting. And we have determined a long time ago that these meetings are important to Pine County because we're Pine County's representative. So we want to attend.
Are other boards, like the library board is in person only, are other boards doing that now, or are they still doing virtual or?
The solid waste board is in person.
Okay.
But they had a hard time doing it anytime during, because some of their local boards, like Knabec, they never met virtually
Okay.
and Mille Lacs. So they just can't do it.
Okay.
And I would add, especially for new commissioners, it's hard being on a board. You never really
Right.
shook hands or said, hi, how are you? Type of stuff. But that'll just mean the in-person stuff is that much more important. So when you do have a meeting that's in person, I would, strongly urge to get together. And I'm guessing if we have like an AMC conference this year, it'll be a pretty big deal for everybody to get in person, just to reestablish some of the connections and
Yeah,
that kind of stuff,
you're right.
So, like you said, if your monthly meetings, normal pay the bills are remote and you have 1 or 2 a year, like in Monticello or a couple of them that go and meet, I don't see an issue with that at all. So I'm not the type that likes driving around either. So.
Sometimes it's really nice if your spouse goes with you and you stop and have dinner with somebody on the way home or something. But most of the time, we all have things we want to do other than drive. Thanks, David. It gives us a good, I was reading through this the other day and thought, well, we've made, I think, really good progress.
And I think that in January of 2022, there's a lot of thinking that can be given to the goals because we have accomplished so many of them. It's almost, we need to start, I don't want to say from scratch because we want to build on what we've accomplished, but there's just, I think, the opportunity to create some longer term vision goals.
I think it's been a great thing to set some goals and some change during the year and you realize that maybe that wasn't the most important thing I had to do in life because the world changed. But we really, when we've set our mind to it and been deliberate about accomplishing things, we've been quite good at it. Anybody got any other comments on the? Matt, you got anything you want to say?
The only thing I really want to say is I really don't want to give up on the wetland thing. I think we need to at least keep it on our radar on the bank.
The wetland bank?
Yes. Yes.
And that's exactly what I was going to speak to, is just kind of what that's been looking like lately. It's, we have a lot of staff working with landowners, and we've really opened our eyes over the last couple of years of what a good wetland bank site looks like and how to identify that through historic aerial photography, things like that. So there was a gentleman who bought an old sod farm, and you could see all the ditches that had been a drained wetland. So a guy was calling to, consider buying that, and we just let him know, hey, just so you know, this looks like a good candidate for wetland banking. And it was a developer. So I think we're trying to build awareness that way. And then there was another site that we saw that a farmer was using that just looked like it was starting to revert to wetland. It looked, and just a big 80 acres, a big series of ditches right adjacent to Mission Creek. And it looked like it had some promise. So we did some investigation on that, and the landowner was interested. Again, it ended up not being a site just because of
some of the nuances of how that all works. But so it's something that I think we're chipping away at, but it's not something where you can say, okay, by the end of the year, this is going to happen. But at any rate, know that it's not something that we're giving up on.
I think Caleb brings up a good point. If we need wetland credits, and I don't care if I'm buying them from Pine County or I'm buying them from Joe Blow, as long as they're available and locally. So if we can figure out a way to help local landowners develop their own wetland bank, then they can make some money. And we have accomplished our goal. I guess, in the end, that's what we want, is developers to be able to have that available to them.
Mr. Chair, if I could add, and I would just like to offer anyone listening online or in the room here, as a person who's actually bought wetland credits and had to buy wetland credits, I would just like to offer my insight any time of the day. Call me anytime, and I could probably explain quite some detail without taking all the time today at this meeting about it and what I learned about doing it. I don't know how many people here have actually had to buy them and go through it and actually have built and developed. I can offer that information to anybody that wants to listen. So give me a call anytime.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to economic development update.
Morning.
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 All right. Thank you, Ryan. So I've added some slides. I'm Leslie, your Economic Development Coordinator. Asked here to give you an update of where things are from the last time I gave you an update in June. So first and foremost, my clicker, right? Broadband's been my primary focus since I started. I think also a big reason behind the hiring of this position was to start working on this issue. And in the last month, we've hired Hometown Fiber after we did the RFP, looking for a broadband consultant. And I met with them last week, and they're inventorying our existing network, getting the GIS maps updated, already identifying some low-hanging fruit or some areas where they know maybe fiber wasn't constructed in the best way, and proposing ways that we could maybe work with providers to improve those connections and access points. So some of those stories that you hear from people where they've been told they should have a certain speed, and maybe this is the reason they can't achieve that speed. So identifying some of those, the process with them involves mapping it out, doing an overview of who is providing what at what speeds, and then figuring out how we can identify those easy projects. They're not going to be easy, but it'll be easier for us to identify where to push the money to if needed, and also apply for grants outside of the funding that we have available through the American Rescue Plan Act. So moving from there, I also talked with Hometown Fiber a little bit about our Community Development Block Grant Award that we got through the Department of Employment and Economic Development. As you all are aware, we did get about 3.7 million, about 3,150,000 is for broadband, and then the balance is for rehabbing the shelter. And right now we're just working through some of the red tape, and that's the best way that I could probably explain it. Through these contracts, we have to do an environmental review because this involves construction, and there are some hoops to jump through because these are federal dollars, and just trying to meet what the state staff believe are the requirements and how we're interpreting it, and just walking through this kind of muddled process to get the funds out the door. But to be completely honest with you, don't expect any actual construction till next year, because there's just notices, public hearings, reviews, comments that all need to go through before any kind of dirt can move. And to be honest, any kind of activity happens on the shelter as well. So it's all kind of together, but it'll take a while. But it's a great program. It's a great opportunity to push some money into 2 projects that really need it. Continuing on broadband, we were also selected to participate in the Blandon Broadband community program through Blandon again. And this is the same foundation that did the CBR with us. The good thing about this is it's a 2-year partnership. We kind of build on what we did at CBR. We've identified a steering committee of about 8 community members, and it'll be those 8 community members that help us bring the community into our meetings to discuss broadband projects. Through this process, we will identify what the community needs are, what goals we want to achieve, and hopefully we will get a $75,000 grant to work on one of those projects. What that looks like, we don't know yet, but I'm hoping to mesh it also with the hometown fiber contract. They'll help us maybe identify some of those easy projects that this 75,000 could be pushed towards to improve connections to people. So it's all coming together very nicely. All right, and then some quick wins that we had beyond getting grant awards was I did an interview with Minnesota Public Radio, identifying that broadband is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. I guess that little tagline got me in the article, so I was pretty excited that Pine County could be highlighted. We've also been asked to speak to the governor's broadband task force this week. Both Commissioner Holland and Commissioner Lovegren could participate in that with me if they want to. I've sent you the links, but we just have some quick questions to talk about what broadband looks like here and what we're working on. And it's a great opportunity to talk to the people who influence broadband policies in the state, as well as the grant funds that come our way. Additionally, I've been working with regional people to do a broadband conference that's coming up on October 6th. And there is always, as usual, the annual Land and Broadband Conference in mid-October that you all are invited to as well. These are just things that other communities have been participating in for the last 5 to 10 years. And it's these types of activities that help get ourselves noticed, and you know, the people that make the funding decisions can maybe start picking our projects. The other big project has been the American Rescue Plan Act, and I just kind of wanted to share with you guys in charts and kind of allocations to show where we're at. We've done some good work with identifying some public health projects with the mental health mini grants, the outreach and education position, workspace renovations, communication tools, and supervision tools as well. As the folks from Windermere Township noted, we've also allocated some funding to a stormwater study, and we've executed contracts with Pine Tech and Lakes and Pines to do a countywide rehab program and all of the college initiative programs that we have to help develop our workforce. We are on a good path forward to doing exactly what these funds are for, strengthening our community so that in the future we're ready to pivot and handle anything that should come our way. Additionally, we've used a little bit of the funds to match our study, our contract with Hometown Fiber, matching the Blandon grant that we received to do that project as well. So this is kind of what it looks like so far. A good chunk of it is still unallocated, and that's where my next slide kind of walks you through maybe where we think it's going. If some of the projected projects get approved by the board, what it would look like in the end. And this is kind of pulled from that spreadsheet, which is my next slide, that is in your packet. It takes this and puts it into kind of a nicer format to see kind of at the end where we would be. But if the jail renovations were to happen, that would go under public health, and that brings our public health response to about a 31% portion of the pie. I've slipped in there some ideas to do a household well program through rural development, which requires a 10% match. So we've used some of that to match that grant if we were to apply for it. It doesn't open until next summer, but it's something to think about since we have a septic program to start a well program as well. And then maybe open it up to some of the cities and townships and other jurisdictions if they have stormwater, sewer, water projects that are put on hold because they've experienced decreased revenue. Not a lot of our cities and townships are getting as much money as the county. So this is a way to partner and leverage those dollars to push it a little bit further. In development, the biggest stumbling block is roads, water, and sewer to get development to happen. So that's one kind of suggestion. And then investing in economic impact. So one thing I'll touch on later is childcare is also another ingredient to economic development. If there's sufficient childcare, then your workers have somewhere to send their kids and they're happy to take jobs. And then building some food shelf capacity and potentially doing some countywide marketing to really pull people into Pine County. Because I think in certain communities, there might be someone who's really good at marketing a certain event or a certain community asset, but who is actually marketing Pine County as a whole, which in turn could also help Sheriff's Department recruit staff if we're selling Pine County as this great place to live. That's another bucket of money, kind of just suggesting that that could be a project. And then broadband, we've talked about working with Hometown Fiber, doing the blend and broadband community, but how else are we going to invest in broadband? And this would be allocating a little bit of the funds to grants to providers. And in the packet, I also provided to you guys an example that I stole from Cass County, I'll be honest. Tweaked it to meet our needs, but that was the suggestion of, if we were to do some of these projects, we can't do them by ourselves. So we would reach out to the communities. We've allocated maybe some funding for these projects. Please tell us how you're going to do it and what it looks like, and tell us how this addresses responding to the pandemic or rescuing ourselves from the pandemic. So that's just kind of planting some seeds. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And this is just the spreadsheet that's in your packet as well, where we're tracking some of the things. As we walk through it, I'm categorizing each of the projects by what's allowed in ARPA. If it's bold, the board's approved it. If it's red, we're still kind of mulling around numbers and nothing's finalized. And then the bottom box is projects that have not yet been formally presented to you, but we've discussed internally or in committees, and things we're just rolling around. So, yeah. And this is what the community funding requests would look like. Allocating about 500,000 for community requests for water and sewer, 175,000 for economic impacts, specifically targeting childcare, food shelves, and maybe a marketing plan, and then 750,000 for broadband, looking for those providers. And I guess in my mind, I picture that broadband as Hometown Fiber's identified like 10 projects, and we put it out there that we want these done. Who's going to do them? And here we have some funds to help you with. Figure it out. There's federal funding and state funding for broadband, so that'll be probably part of it. Hometown Fiber is developing what that'll look like exactly.
Leslie, when does Hometown Fiber think they might have something for us to?
I'm hoping that they will have something for our mid-October land and broadband community kickoff meeting. So we're going to have the orientation meeting at the end of the month for our steering committee. And then we're going to host like a big community meeting, much like the one that was held in January, where people who are interested in broadband can come in. And I'm hoping that Hometown Fiber will attend and have some potential projects identified, or at least some of the mapping done to identify what they've seen and where we could push that to. But their project is going to bring us to the end of the year. We shouldn't have it all completed until the end of December, early January. Okay. So the next kind of big project has been working with the HRA. In July, I submitted a request for technical assistance because we had seen some turnover on the board and thought that board development would be a really good next move. Exploring what it would look like to be a joint HRA and economic development authority, and also working with county staff to utilize some banked beds that are in the supportive housing program, which is formerly known as GRH, or group residential housing, because they're finding that as people are transitioning out of foster care, there's just not a lot of accessible housing options. They can get them into housing, but it's just not meeting their needs for their mobility. So figuring out how we could entice a developer to come here and build that type of housing that then would be subsidized with the GRH banked bed subsidies. Since we submitted that request, there has been more turnover on the HRA board, so it seemed even more important to get this technical assistance from MHP, and I should find out by next week, by the end of the month, if they're going to select our project. And meanwhile, David's kind of been working on this angle, is getting their books audited And we brought forward to you guys last month, doing a development authority study committee. So my next few slides are just kind of walking you through what that kind of looks like to kind of prep it. And I apologize if you already know all this, but I feel like it's a good reminder of what development can look like in a community that embraces having both an HRA or just an EDA. So right now the county has an HRA and it's a public corporation. They manage public housing. They can deliver housing assistance programs and they can work on planning and community development activities. They do have quite a bit of power and they can do quite a bit with what they have. Just north of us, in Carlton County, they have a separate EDA and a separate HRA, and they actually have, a county HRA and individual city HRAs that do a lot of development projects. There's apartment buildings, senior housing. Their executive director does work on those pretty actively. So 30, 40 years ago, when the properties were developed by Pine County HRA, that's just an example of something they could continue to do if they wanted to. Right now, they're just managing their properties, and not just managing their properties, but they are managing properties and not much else beyond that, but they do have powers to do more. An economic development authority can do similar functions as an HRA, but does it more of the business end rather than housing. And that's kind of the biggest difference. They really focus on doing business assistance and development programs. Quite often they're heavily involved in forming technology and industrial parks, creating revolving loan funds, working with state and federal entities to bring in different outside funding and having a spot for those funds to be housed. And then there's a couple other ways that you can, adopt development authorities, a rural development finance authority, and that's typically done in areas where agriculture and natural resource industries are big, and port authorities when you obviously have a port that you're managing. And also there's some other development organizations that exist in our communities that do very similar things. We have commercial clubs, which sometimes transform into chambers of commerce eventually, and development corporations. I don't know of any existing development corporations in the county that I could find doing searches, but we do have quite a few chambers of commerce, and they work to promote the community that they're in, tourism, and the businesses that are members of their chamber. And I just wanted to kind of give you guys an overview of our three neighboring counties, Chisago, Kennebunk, and Carlton, and what they do. So Chisago County has a joint HRA EDA. They do a lot of various housing resources. They own and operate a few facilities. They do down payment and closing cost loans. They do housing rehab loans. And I remember when I started at Lakes and Pines, we do all of this in all of our counties except for Chisago. That was always the outlier because they did it themselves. And in asking staff there at that time, I was like, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? They're like, no, it's a good thing. We wish everybody would kind of take on some of these. We're here to fill the gaps at Lakes and Pines. But Chisago County had undertaken some of those themselves. And they're viewed just as a partner of Lakes and Pines. If you were to visit their website, you'd also see that they do a showcase of what it's like to visit Chisago County. They highlight their parks and trails and attractions and events, and they work very closely with their chambers of commerce to do that. They also do a lot of business resource assistance. They are an SBDC, Small Business Development Center. They can review people's business plans and their finance applications. And they also work through the county government to do tax increment financing and tax abatement. And they work directly with those developers looking to come to town to connect them with the right resources. Nancy at Chisago County also is really big into the site selector stuff, which is just showcasing what exists and having a real good pulse on what land is available, what buildings are available, and having it at people's fingertips so they know. You shouldn't have to know somebody to be able to find vacant land. And that's kind of the point, is to get it on a website or at least link to a contact so you can find a place to put your business if you want it. And she's also, and her office has been very involved in broadband, and they are a telecommuter forward community. So all of this falls under the HRA EDA because it's a blended HRA EDA. And it all works in concert to help spur economic development. Canaba County has an EDA, and they recently did hire an executive director a handful of years ago. Very similar offerings with the business resources. Heidi is also an SBDC consultant, so she can offer those same services to people walking in that want to start a business, and does some site selector stuff on her website. Canaba County is a lot smaller than Chisago County, so there's not as much on there, where Nancy has probably 7 different communities with industrial sites and business sites. Heidi's got Mora for the most part. But it is a great place for information. So it's kind of like the stopping point. If you're looking at Canaba County, here's the page you visit to find pretty much everything. If you're moving your business there, you're moving your family there. It's a great connection to a lot of community resources. She is also working on broadband as well. And then, yeah.
Just a question. Do you know staffing of these authorities?
Not off the top of my head, but I know kind of anecdotally, I think Nancy's got maybe 2 people under her that kind of work in the respective areas. I could be wrong because I think there's been some turnover, retirement, but I know that they used to have just a housing person and then an economic development and then kind of like an office assistant that kept things organized. Heidi is alone in her office, and Carleton County has.
Thank you.
So Carleton County EDA and their economic development office was their clearinghouse for all their COVID-19 assistance. That is their main page, was how they were assisting their businesses during that time. They also do site selection and business assistance. It looks like they manage some grants and loan programs for the most part. They just don't have the housing end because, as I alluded to earlier, Cloquet, Carleton have their, and they don't necessarily always work together or work well together. So that was kind of my development authority overview, with the intention that as you find your study committee members, I hope you find people that are thinking long-term about Pine County. Over the past few years, I was delighted to see that you guys have done some strategic planning around economic development. In those plans that are always on my desk and open, because that's what I do. I'm a planner and I like to check things off lists. It's good to have them out as a reminder. In your economic development strategic plan from 2015 to 2018, you mentioned having an economic development position and considering structured economic development efforts, which is this development authority study commission that you're putting forth. Being an information clearinghouse and supporting your cities and townships, which David's done a great job of reaching out to city administrators. Prior to me being there, I was on the city end of things and always felt like he was a person that you could reach out to discuss these kinds of things. And as well, working with Pine Tech was identified, and you've done a great job specifically in the last year with COVID to really strengthen that partnership and help with workforce development. There's not a lot of counties or communities that can say they're doing that. So that's huge. At the same time you were doing this strategic planning, you also had a strategic housing plan done through CETA. And in there, they note that tourism is a pathway to economic development, supporting your entrepreneurs and small business startups, increasing your business diversity, acknowledging that retail and hospitality are big employers. And honestly, in my next couple of slides, we'll talk about statistics, kind of drive down what it looks like to work here, and drive down by saying that like the wages aren't very high. You know how if you have 2,000 people that make $10 an hour, that looks very different on a scale than if you have 200 that make $40 an hour. It just kind of drives the data down. So working on business diversity, so your main employers are just in that industry. And then establishing some housing rehab programs, which we've started with the American Rescue Plan Act, and continuing to partner with Pine Tech for workforce development. So you're well on your way of accomplishing many of these goals that were identified in these plans. But as we get these data profiles from the state, it's kind of like are we doing a good job? Well, I think we are. And sometimes, I look at the data, you can skew data to do whatever you want. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I like to mess with numbers because you can have it tell a story or you can make it look good or bad, depending on how you clean it up. But overall, our 2021 profile was showing a negative job growth of 11.2%. The obvious reason for that is the complete shutdown of hospitality and retail stores for the most part with the pandemic. As noted in the report, that's our largest job category. There was a 41% decrease in those jobs. But there was a 30% increase in construction jobs, a 19% increase in manufacturing jobs, and a 52% increase in administrative support and waste management, which I'm really curious what that is. I'm not 100% certain what fits in that job category. We'll have to do some digging, but 2 of those job categories have pretty decent wages, some of the higher ones in our community. So that's, even though we've seen a negative job growth, we've seen some positive job growth in areas that give us more diversity. So it's a good thing. Our average annual wage though is $37,000 a year, which is lower than the state average and lower than our neighbors. So on the right, I give some housing statistics. The average family in our county is bringing in about $66,000 a year. As you can see, our neighboring communities all bring in more. The cost of living in Pine County is lower than the state average, but not much lower. And in Carleton County, their cost of living is much lower than what their family income is. So you can see that they have a little bit more wiggle room in their budget to do fun things. Looking at it in a side-by-side comparison, in Pine County, our childcare and our transportation are some of the biggest factors into why we have a higher cost of living. It's not our housing, it's not our food costs. It was the childcare and the transportation that were higher than communities with similar costs of living. So something just to consider. Because while our wages might be lower, so is our cost of living. But if we start solving some of those issues, I don't know, $1,200 a month in transportation is insane. But if you've ever had a commuter in your household, you know that that is pretty darn accurate. So in progress right now, we're working on broadband. There's been some movement in the housing realm with the addition of a housing rehab program and looking at the HRA board and exploring what they might do differently or expand to do. There's been more collaboration with Pine Tech to develop a good workforce. The Pine County College Initiative alone, I'm excited to see what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years and how we can keep people here. In particular, I'm trying to set up some tours between our high schools and manufacturers so we can really make that connection between you're from here, you live here, you can get this scholarship to go to Pine Tech. Here's where you can actually work and what it looks like and the people you would work with. So this is my one ask. If you know manufacturers, please put a bug in their ear because they're not responding to me too quickly. I know there's COVID concerns with having 50 students walk through your plant, but it'd be nice to figure out a way to get those students connected with local employers and keep them here so we don't see that mass exodus out. There's also, we're still doing the regional collaboration. I have been on GPS 4593 for about 10 or 11 years. I'm currently their treasurer on their executive committee. You just inherited that when you inherited me. So there continues to be regional collaboration around economic development, and I don't foresee that going away anytime soon. But looking into the future, I do think promoting tourism, it's already here. We should just do a better job of selling it. We are one of the best kept secrets in the state, I think. And I sometimes like it that way when I have the side-by-sides going past my driveway all weekend. But there is a way to attract those people to spend money at our local businesses. And I've seen that firsthand when Interstate 35 was shut down in Pine City. People were coming down Highway 61 and they're like, you have a brewery? And then suddenly they're spending an hour in downtown Pine City at the scrapbooking store and exploring a 120-year-old hardware store and buying a nice Tiffany lamp there. It's crazy how that can happen. So sharing what we have in our communities so that our businesses can, be successful off of that. And then thinking about how we attract people to buy land here and do business development. supporting our local entrepreneurs and startups. That's one thing, every time I've been looking at statistics of the region when I worked at Lakes and Pines, it was always kind of funny to me to see how low the wages were, but I would know people who are self-employed that make a decent living, but how these numbers don't capture that very well. So there is this hidden entrepreneurial spirit in our community that I think we just need to cultivate and support a little more. And there are a lot of studies that show in rural communities that your entrepreneurs are the reason that your communities stay alive. And on that end, Ben Winchester is doing a really good presentation at the GPS annual meeting. I would love for you guys to come listen to it because he talks about that you might think some rural communities are dying, but they're not. They're not. And I think, I look at Josh because we both stuck around this community and raised our kids here, and we know it's not. I know my second grader, when she was enrolled in kindergarten, it was the largest kindergarten class that Pine City School District had ever had. And now my youngest is in kindergarten and they had to add a 6th section. So we are growing, but we're just not responding to the census in a very good way. So people don't see it on the numbers and the data. Because we're private people, I guess. And lingering things that are always, on the back burner, but we probably need to think about a little more is how to support childcare, how to increase the number of childcare slots in our community. Not to brag or anything, but in Pine City, we did a really good job of partnering with, or at least matching up providers with grant opportunities so that St. Mary's could open up a closed school into a childcare center, and matching that person up with the city of Sandstone so that the John Wright building could be converted into a childcare center, and just increase the number of childcare slots that we have in our community. Supporting people who want to open them up in their home, figuring out how they can do that, and what role the county has in that. I'm not 100% certain, but sometimes it's just throwing it out there to ask what is the need and how can we help fill it. And as always, transportation has been an issue ever since, gas went over 99 cents a gallon, let's be honest. So figuring out how can we be a commuter friendly community? What are we doing to help people, do ride shares if necessary and things like that. So that is the end of my presentation, and I would love to hear your feedback, comments, suggestions. It's a bit overwhelming to work in economic development because there's a million ways and directions that you can take economic development. And right now with broadband, the American Rescue Plan, and the HRA, that's kind of the top 3. But I would love to hear what your thoughts are on marketing. Is that a big thing? I know I'd like to focus on working on the website, getting that to be kind of an information clearinghouse. What are your thoughts?
I think you hit the nail on the head of many, many points. And I'm an import to Pine County. I grew up someplace else and I came here. I never forget when I drove to Pine City for an interview, I came in some back road that I found on a map, and I drove by the Snake River out by the fur post and thought, holy cats, this has to be like heaven for a young guy that likes to hunt and fish. And I got a job here and I must have liked it, and I stayed for 50 years, almost. So my kids could have worked any place. They chose to live in Pine City. Out of 4 adults in my little family, 3 of them commute. And so I understand that commuting, but they have figured out how to be part of Pine City's community. And, my son's on the fire department and involved in their church, and they're active in the community, but it's different than getting off at 4 o'clock and driving the mile home. You get off at 4:30 in the cities and it's 6 when you get home and you're exhausted. So it's a different life, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I too think it's the best kept secret of any place that you can live. In 1 hour, I can go to a Twins game, a Vikings game, the Ordway, whatever I want to do in the cities. And in 30 seconds, I can walk out my back door and be in the country. No, and sometimes I worry about that too, when I see all the side by sides going by the driveway. Wow, people are figuring this out.
Leslie had mentioned the Ben Winchester presentation. It is Friday, the 24th, so Friday of next week. It's 10:30, 12:30 at the casino. There's no cost, but there is a registration, and I think the registration deadline is really soon,
It is tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Yes.
So if you are interested, you can say so right now, and we'll get you registered, or, so Debbie, did you get that? Terry is interested, so if you can make a note, we'll get her
I'll be-
registered.
I'll be interested. I am interested.
And Steve as well.
So it's the 20,
I might have already registered. I don't remember. I know it's on my calendar.
Yep, it's the 24th at 10:30 to 12:30 at Grand Casino Hinckley. And any local official, if Windermere Township folks want to go, it's open to any local official who is interested in learning more about the rural economy. And Ben spoke at one of our local government officials meetings
he is really
4 years ago.
really a good presenter.
No, Josh, you brought him up a few times.
I've seen him at least 3 times and I would go again if I could, but yeah, I would, anybody go see, I mean, he's awesome. He's totally the opposite of gloom and doom. So, and that's what I like about it. So.
And
Oh, I was going to say, did you want to finish more about that?
nope, I'm done with that.
Okay. I like the fixing our website idea. I think that we do have so many hidden gems, and if we could put them out there and promote them, I think that would be a great thing to do. And I know that that's always been a hard thing, right, Ryan? With the website, on what you can put on there, what you can't put on there, but if there could be a page dedicated maybe towards what we have to offer, that would be.
And there is like a Visit Pine County site. It's just combining it. So it's, and I have it on my to-do list to connect with Ryan to figure out how we can map it out so it's best suited. Because if you're visiting to just visit for the weekend, you're looking for specific information. If you're interested in moving here because you have a job offer, you want that information and some more. So just kind of figuring it out. Yeah. And yeah, it's quite the undertaking. I'm not a huge fan of website development, but I can muddle my way through, and I think working with Ryan, it would be a project, but something that we could work on together.
Leslie, I don't know how this fits with economic development, but I think we've all gone to a restaurant. Sign says, be patient, short staffed. And I understand from their perspective that they're not getting workers. They can't manufacture one, but they're doing the best they can. This morning, prior to this meeting, I went to a body shop to see about fixing an old pickup of mine, and the guy says, "I'd love to, Steve, but I'm really short-handed. I could get to it. I'm just."
Yeah.
So apparently there's 2 pretty diverse industries that can't find workers. So will this initiative that we have with Pine Tech help some of that? I'm hoping turn out some people that will be mechanically inclined that can stay around here and be mechanics and body men and that sort of thing.
Plumbers, electricians.
Electricians, plumbers. You tried to get a plumber lately?
Yes.
So they warned us about this, and I think the pandemic just made it a little bit worse. But being kind of a data geek, they were warning us that when the baby boomers started retiring, that we were going to see this happen. The silver tsunami is coming, and what are you going to do? And I think that this college initiative is one part of the solution. And but the fact still remains that you have a whole generation retiring that's asking nicely for services and things to get done, but we just don't have the same number of people that were born in the generation following to provide those. Even if you had done, the best job of succession planning and training, you're still seeing this lack of people to get there. But I do think the college initiative is part of it. But one thing I do want to mention is that Kelly shared out of the Ellers report is that the unemployment rate is really, really low right now. And it's not seasonally adjusted. And, it's just like the snippet of each month what D does, but we're at like 3.7% unemployment, which is.
At workforce, they said Minnesota's 3.4, Pine County is 3.7.
Yes.
Well, 3.7 in a normal world, we would say we had full employment.
Right.
And so what am I missing? I'm no economist, but something is really screwed up when we only have 3.7 unemployment in Pine County and you can't get a chair at a restaurant.
More demand than there is bodies.
Yeah.
Fill the spots. And I think healthcare was screaming this 5 years ago as they saw the influx of more services and more health issues we got, and we pushed people into healthcare jobs and it's now industry wide. So, I'm not an economist either, but that's what they've been telling us for years is it's coming. What are you doing to prepare for it? And I'm super excited to see how we will be different than our surrounding counties with this college initiative, because if we can train them and encourage them to stay here, but we also have to be working on quality of life things, making sure that there's housing starter homes for them to move into. So as people age, they can age in place in their home just fine. I mean, you're discussing the other day of where you move things to, make it accessible as you age, but do we have resources so people can do that? And then are we also looking to the future of, is there somewhere for people to move so that these starter homes can open up? And are we encouraging homeownership and down payment assistance programs? So those are the things that, you can talk about workforce, but where are they going to live? And are you going to have childcare centers and daycare providers to provide that? And is it going to be a great place to live with all the amenities that everybody wants? But I think moving there, we just have to, embrace this development authority study committee and find some good people to make some decisions, because that's really what's going to set the tone for the next 5 to 10 years, at least, to address this workforce shortage that we are experiencing.
One of the things I look at too is, like you talked about, entrepreneurship, and one thing that's extremely scary, there's a ton of people in our age group that are more than capable of owning a business and starting a business and doing all that stuff. And me, as of just adding a second one now, how scary that is. But I have a lot of support through the brand that I have, and to help me like put it on a piece of paper. I didn't go to college. I can run a business. I can do what I do that well, but let's put it on paper to make sure it can pay the bills. I don't care what it costs, what all that stuff is, that's here nor there. But I think if we as a county can offer that, because there's so many businesses out there that don't have the backbone, like I said, what I did was almost kind of easy when I just look at the piece of paper and say, well, okay, as long as we can pay the bills and pay our employees and all that stuff, that's all I need to know. But starting off a concrete business or something, a liquor store or something like that, where they don't necessarily have that resource to somebody write a business plan, to go to the bank and have some leverage, or say, hey, here's the gap. There is gap financing. There's a lot of people that have no clue. I didn't have a clue until I got into this. So,
and being that resource for those budding entrepreneurs or people with ideas to help them vet out their idea, work through the financials, and then say, here, now you can take it to the bank. It's good to go, from my opinion, gives them that confidence. We do have a lot of small startups in our county. I was just talking to Jordan the other day, and I think they just funded, I want to say it was some sort of cattle business out in Graston, but it's off Henriette Road. And there was recently the exterior siding cleaner that started up in Rock Creek. And it's just, they're starting up. So these people are finding the resources, but we're probably missing 6 others that just don't know where to start and don't want to call somebody in Mora don't want to call somebody in Brainerd. We don't have that here, or Duluth or wherever you would be shipped to, because we don't have that here yet, but maybe in the future.
Also too, I've talked to a lot of people that are working for even a larger company that maybe want to someday own it or something like that. And I think succession planning is another huge thing, to talk to the business owners to say, hey, you should start thinking about this 10, maybe even 15 years from now. Somebody that's working for you that, you could get into a profit sharing or something, and they can really honestly take the business to the next level. The business owner could sell it to that person it would just be a better, with coming in with nothing. I guess that's what most people don't think they can start a business without having a substantial amount in their back pocket to start it. And you can literally walk into one, you gotta do it right, but, and make it successful. So that's another thing, I think, business succession. I talked to a lot of people our age that work for their parents that, are like, well, I can never afford that. I can never buy that. Well, there's a way to get it done.
So
Yeah.
Leslie, I think, has done more in the last few months on economic development than we accomplished, in a decade. So hurrah, right? I mean, this is exciting stuff. The next step is really to run to ground the development authority and create an agency that Leslie can work with that has the powers and the authorities to do the things that we're hoping to do. And so all of the jurisdictions which got an email inviting them to participate in this process. If you get questions from them, certainly you can explain why it's important. Let me know if you want, some background on that. But that's going to be something that hopefully MHP and Matt will help facilitate. But that's something, to me, that is the next big important step, because in a small sense, we learned when we did the business loan to Easy Box that the county doesn't even have the authority to make a business loan out of our revolving loan fund. So we have money sitting in the bank literally that we can't do anything with to help those businesses because we don't have that development authority.
Yeah, and there are state resources that we can apply for as a local unit of government, but without that development authority arm to funnel it through, we're kind of just sitting in a boat watching it float by, because there's not much we can do to grab at it. For example, if we have a business coming in and they qualify for a deed program and then they repay that loan, we can get a portion of that loan and then start a revolving loan fund with it. But without the authority, we really can't. Nor do I currently even have the expertise to kind of process those loans. So establishing the development authority gives you that framework to start building. So small businesses can come in and ask for assistance because you have dedicated staff that have been trained to do, these financial analysis or business plan reviews for people. And you can start building those programs. Or if some, you want to start a first-time home buyer program. Sure, as a county, we can apply for those funds through the state, but without that HRA board backing it, you really can't deliver it to the public. So it feels a little silly at times because you're like, really? But as things were coming across my desk, I'm like, without us being, an EDA HRA or an EDA, I really can't pursue much of this. So it's kind of frustrating from that perspective that you got to have this in order to get this. And I'm gonna think about that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you for having me. It was kind of long-winded.
Thank you.
Oh, worth it. Next up is solid waste ordinance. We're going to take a 2-minute break though.
Oh, that's why Heidi was here. That's why Heidi was here, was for this discussion, but no, she's here with the township head. But now you're wrapping.
We're Yeah. Yeah. So, stay out the.
It's one of those things.
Ryan, where's the nearest printer? If I want to put my slideshow.
Does not everybody report?
Or they're reported. Stuff like that, so it's hard to drag them up.
I suppose each story.
I'm all right, myself.
I like them.
Yeah, you're operating down there.
My neighbor.
Is that right? Jeez, we never got out to look at that property monster.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe how lucky we are to have her. I can't believe how lucky we are to have her.
Oh.
I thought we were pretty lucky to have Robert too.
Yeah.
He just didn't invest.
She's, takes it to.
It's pretty active in our community and in our neighborhood.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of septic tanks that pump around the lanes.
And he's got
Right.
smaller children, so I think this spring that probably.
Well, I haven't forgotten about you, so whenever you're ready, I'm ready.
That'd be nice. You can walk it out, look at it.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of it.
I'd look a little better with all the stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll circle back.
Good deal.
You make it to that funeral Sunday?
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah. I didn't.
Sure. I don't think we have a clip.
I don't
I don't have any slides.
Okay. I'm not gonna be clipping that either.
I did not.
So glad you came today.
Commission. No, I didn't. Just kidding. Have you looked at the agenda and known the solid waste ordinance was on here too?
Yeah,
Yeah, I read that.
every now and then I pull preparedness out of my hat, not too often, so.
Did I tell you that she came also to the Certain Lake Township UP discussion too and kind of?
I was not gonna tolerate anything but a yes. To be really honest with you.
Well.
Well, I think that was kind of the.
That
was great.
You were
Just
so helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. No, those are just really important. I think it stems back to
And so that's
perception, bad information, all of it. We just have to
their local government.
continue to battle and move through, but you know, so yes,
And the other
goes down there.
half can be interesting.
Oh, at the transfer station. It's like, no, where? What? You love it.
It's like I drive in there and Jill looks at me, my daughter, she's it's like you're coming home. It's like scary.
Heidi's in there taking selfies.
We should start having
Check it out.
customer of the week and stuff.
Hey, we'll get back to business here.
I didn't catch
Very
it.
pleasant.
Yeah, and I'll send you.
Okay.
Oh, Caleb, you're up.
Thank you.
You're up.
So a couple months ago at one of these COW meetings, I brought to the board's attention, we've got this solid waste ordinance from 1990 that has aged a bit. Someone put a sign on my back. So it's, our ordinance is aged a bit with very little update. There's some things that have maybe become a little bit irrelevant over time. Maybe some policies that don't make as much sense today as they did in 1990. And we've had some issues come up where we kind of look to this ordinance for guidance. So at that time, we contemplated formation of an ad hoc committee to kind of go through a planning process for reviewing the ordinance and contemplating changes. So I have worked with David and Kelly a bit on making a proposal for what that ad hoc committee might consist of, which was in the board packet. A couple of county commissioners, perhaps someone from the county zoning board, a city representative, a township representative, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency representative, and a local solid waste industry representative. So if you remember, the ordinance addresses solid waste facilities. If someone's going to start a recycling business or a landfill, there would be standards in this ordinance. There's also some language about storing solid waste on your property, disposing it on your property, hauling it for waste haulers, things like that. So there's a few different angles on how we manage solid waste. But, and then I also want to introduce Heidi Croning from Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, who's also on the Windermere Township Board. So she works in the solid waste division of MPCA. So great resource for us. And she's been, it's been incredibly helpful to be able to ask for her expertise. So she is one of the folks I would propose for that committee. And then I also kind of threw together a planning process timeline. That's kind of a draft that could be adapted a bit, but just to kind of get an idea of what might this look like. And it's basically a meeting about 3 times over the course of 6 months, and in hopes, starting this fall, in hopes that by next spring, maybe we would have an ordinance that the county board could consider. So that's what I've kind of prepared for you. You have thoughts, concerns?
Well, I think we should almost have a clock on any of these things that we do, because time slips away from us. You know, we found that out with the comprehensive plan. That was from when, 91? And, you know, kind of a similar thing here, and not that they did a heck of a job in 91. They really did, but just language kind of changes, and we've got a few more people living here than we had in 91. And I sit on the Central Solid Waste Commission, and the numbers scare me for the amount of tonnage get brought to the landfill has increased, I think, exponentially in the last few years. We had a meeting yesterday at the transfer site in Cambridge, and we need to build a new transfer station there. We need to fix the one that burned, need a new one, because that place on a busy summer day takes in 400,000 pounds of garbage. I mean, that's incredible to me. On a poor day, it takes in 200,000. I can't imagine. I mean, I can't even hardly get my mind around those numbers. And so we got to do our part. Maybe we can lead the pack. East Central Minnesota, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, guys, but we are throwing away an incredible amount of stuff every day. And we got to figure out some better way to get rid of it or quit throwing it away. That's my 2 cents. So this is spot on in my book. We need to take a better look at it, or a fresh look at it, I guess. Maybe they've done such an incredible job, we don't have to change everything, but I think we know they do, so that we do. And thank you for, I'm assuming you've said yes, you'd sit on that committee.
A lot of options, though.
You're
A pleasure.
you're drafted.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer. Yeah.
Thank you much. I think sometimes, you know, people, Do you ever get that feeling when you say, I'm here from the MPCA to help? And they go, oh, they tremble in their boots.
Oh, it's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think it's great to have somebody that on the ground floor, if we're looking at a way to rewrite our ordinance. We want to try to get it right.
And I think it'll be helpful with the township perspective as well. So maybe I'll weigh more heavily on that as well, because it's just balancing the two. It's important.
I think, from my perspective, we've done a tremendous job apparently with the Willow River Transfer Station. And it's heavily. And so just from that standpoint, I think we must have hit that nail on the head. The one in Pine City, Caleb keeps telling me isn't as well used, but every time I go there, there's 4 or 5 cars there dropping stuff off. So to me, people have figured it out. Maybe we don't bring as much garbage there, but we bring a lot of cardboard, and plastics, stuff like that. So what do you need, Caleb? Do you need a recommendation to move forward with forming a committee? And is that committee then set by the county board?
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I think what would be helpful is if there were 2 commissioners who are interested in leading this, if those could, if you could give some thought to who would want to do that. Don't have to make an appointment today, but I think that would be the first step, is to get 2 county commissioners who can spearhead the effort, and then give thought to if you have anybody in mind who would be a good person to fill any of the proposed seats, or if you look at those 7 seats and say, there's a gap, we should have 8 on the committee. It'd be good to get some feedback on that as well.
Well, I'd like to throw my hat in the ring as a county commissioner, just because I think I've got some background, maybe bad background, but I've got background. But I think I got some positive stuff. I don't know if anybody else.
I will.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, I sit with you on the other one as a backup, so I'll jump in. Yeah.
Do you have anybody in mind from the zoning board? Have you talked to anybody?
I haven't approached any of them yet. Now hearing I wondered a little bit about geography.
Yeah.
If maybe we could consider someone a little bit different neighborhoods from the 2 of you might make sense, but I know there's a lot of folks on that are, it's pretty low commitment, the way I've put together the planning process. I think there'd be a few folks who'd be interested.
Anybody have a city representative? Comes to mind?
I can't think of his name, but from Mark from Hinckley, would he be a good asset?
Mark
Perry.
Sure could be.
Yeah, the reason I was wondering if.
And would you fill the role as a township representative or a MPCA rep?
I envision MPCA.
Wonder if we could get somebody from like Denham or Bruno or something, way up.
Outer lying areas, that'd be great.
Maybe Greg.
Or Carrick or.
Yeah. That northeast part of our county, we probably don't have as good of access for them for getting rid of their stuff.
Brook Park and Ascove also are some areas where there's a little bit more solid waste issues.
Good point.
There's some options.
We'll work on that together. If anybody has some ideas, let David know, Caleb know, or myself know, and we'll round out that committee, because I think we'd want to start sooner than later. And
Hey, Caleb,
Yes, sir.
So would it be advantageous to have a contractor, because they're always dealing with construction waste and stuff like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's number 7 on the list, that local solid waste industry representative. So it could be,
Harry Peterson. He wears many hats and he would be a good fit.
He told me no last time on the last thing, but maybe not solid waste yet. We'll see. Want me to ask him, I can, wasn't.
Yeah, I'll ask him. I think Matt has a good point, because one of the problems we have right now at the landfill is apparently, contractors that are tearing down buildings, it's all
Yep.
about money. And they don't want to take their stuff to the demo landfill in Rush City because it's further away. And so they'll pack that roll-off box full of 2x4s and everything else, and that ends up in a landfill instead of ending up in a demo pit. And so it'd be nice to have not the waste hauler as much as the contractor that does that. So Terry would be a good one, because I know they do it because they're in business to make money, and I don't blame them. But we don't have a construction demo option in Pine County. I think they got one in Carlton County, and they got one in Chisago County, and they got one in Kennebec County. But if you're tearing apart a building right in sandstone today, that's a long way to haul a 20-yard box or 30-yard box.
I definitely have some folks from that area who do demolition that we could approach.
Okay. We need anything else?
I think that's good direction.
Right?
I have a question if I can.
Yeah.
Sure. Since there's portions of the ordinance not currently followed or enforced, is there a lot of, I don't need to hear them all right now, but I guess I can't think of any that I've been aware of or anything.
The main
90's been a while, but I'm sure there's other ordinances that have been on the books or laws for a long time that have, we're not changing it just because it's old, right?
No, I think it's refining the policy so that if it's not something that we intend to require licenses for, it'd be to remove that from the ordinance. If it's something that maybe it could happen that someone knocks on the door and wants to start a landfill in the community, and you kind of have to have the right ordinance tools in place. And it's a difficult place to manage that, where zoning is done by townships mostly, and then the amount of oversight on that will vary dramatically. But then the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency steps in, so it's kind of find where's that niche that kind of needs a local set of eyes. I think that's the goal. So does that help?
Well, and then, in background, it says there's adverse judgments in court. Has our county been involved with
So several of the East Central counties adopted that same ordinance that we have in the early 90s. And some of them, in trying to enforce the same ordinance, have had it overturned in court that the language was not enforceable. So it's ineffective, portions of it.
That has to do with probably designation.
I think, and the one that I'm aware of was specifically about storing garbage on private property. People that were just kind of having mounds of garbage.
And the only thing we've found that we can do is if it becomes a public health nuisance, right?
Mhm.
Then we can get it cleaned up. That's the way it is right now.
Do you have any thoughts or feedback on that? just where the MPCA kind of, not to go too far in the weeds, but where you look to local communities on those issues.
Right, so for perspective, because I manage the compliance and enforcement program for the state, and I have 2 representatives in the north that cover the entire northern half of Minnesota. And then I have 1.5 in the south. And then there's a few other in there that do special program initiatives. So from a compliance and enforcement and helping counties, Caleb's, I've worked a lot of. It's just comes down to resources. So we really lean on the counties to have some type of robust language that they can follow up with and through with enforcement. You know, and again, it comes down to a resource language for you folks too, in regards to that. But I'm not sure if I'm getting at what your question was towards me.
That's helpful. I think part of it is just, there can be some duplication, but there becomes a resource issue
Yep.
of sending someone from Brainerd out to Bruno
Right.
when there's a complaint about solid waste, that oftentimes it's better when we can partner. It's more efficient use of public dollars.
Right, like you talk about the garbage piling up outside somebody's house. You have to wait till it's a public nuisance potential issue, right? Whereas with the pollution control agency, we could potentially go in there and make a case out of that with our solid waste rules, with illegal storage of solid waste on site. If it's been, you know, if we can deem it by the pictures that it's reasonable to say that you've been storing this for a long time, you're not a permitted facility, therefore, you know, you need to get it removed. And as we all know, the dance, the biggest dance that, you know, in around updating ordinances and our rule, and we're going through the same thing with the state. I mean, ours go back to when the rule was circling and circle was actually promulgated back in the 80s. We're trying to update our state rule from back then. With this particular area of enforcement, you're looking at the majority of people we do enforcement on are the indigent, the poor, those that are in jail, just got out of jail, have sometimes a rap sheet longer than, you know, the violations that we list on the property. It's a very difficult dance. So updating this, I think, is extremely important, and then making it valid and enforceable is hopefully the piece I can help, because you can write great language, but if you can't enforce it or you're not going to enforce it, it doesn't mean very much. So.
Any more?
Thank you for finding this and bringing it, getting and working to get it done.
Thanks. Move up forward. We look to have a committee meeting, Caleb, probably by what, mid-October, end of October?
Sorry?
Our first committee meeting,
I believe it was November.
November? Okay. All right.
Be able to talk about deer carcasses.
Yeah, not gonna talk about deer carcasses. We are gonna talk about the ATV ordinance per my request. Because I got a question from a neighbor the other day that, how come so-and-so got stopped on their ATV because they weren't riding on the shoulder of Highway 61? So I had no clue. I figured there must have been more to the story than I was hearing. There probably was. I went and read the ordinance. Right. After a while. And it does say that they're supposed to ride on the shoulder if there is a shoulder, if I am reading the ordinance right. Is that correct?
That's correct. So you have to, well, it's not quite as old as the ordinance you just talked about, but it's been a few years, so a good refresher is helpful. So what the county ordinance addresses is class 1 ATVs by definition. And the state defines that as by width. So 50 inches or less wide rim to rim is a class 1. Typically, they're the ones with the handlebars. Class 2 is 50 to 65 inches at the rims. And typically those are the side-by-sides. There are some side-by-sides that don't qualify as a class 2 because they're too wide. but there's really not a good answer on what you do with those. So the state allows class 2 on roadways through their statute. So the ordinance only allows class 1s to basically join the class 2s, I guess is the assumption, in using the roadway.
When you say roadway and state, is that state highways or?
The state statute actually allows public roadways that are county, state aid, county highways, by definition. So they allow them on the county road.
And I just make the point because the county can't regulate the state or the municipals,
Right.
but the state can regulate the county and the municipals and the state. Right?
Sure. So the state does allow county road usage for class 2s. The county ordinance allows class 1s to join them, if you will. Both of them do define that they should be driven on the far right side of the road. So the conservation officer that made the stop and education, I believe, was right in that in either case, that's where they should be driven as a preferred place to be. And then they can obviously use the roadway if there's reasons they have to, or to turn or to do those kind of things. So, that's kind of, to answer your question, an overview of that. Whether the county wants to do something different with it, I guess is obviously up to you guys. I did run some numbers through our system, went back to 2015, the year before the ordinance took effect. And just to give you some numbers of, so I looked at our ATV complaints, our ATV patrol calls that were called, our personal injury off-road vehicles, our ATV roadway accidents, and ATV trail accidents. And I'll just give you the group numbers instead of getting into each one of those. So starting at 2015, the total of those type calls was 26 that we received. In 16, it went up to 36. In 17, it went up to 43. In 18, it went up to 49. 2019, it dropped to 34. And we rebounded very healthily in 2020, and we had 86.
Wow.
And as of 21, this last week, I pulled the numbers and we were only at 19. So we've 20 was, as I'm assuming others in this room can attest, a very busy ATV year for us. I think people found an outlet in the outdoors and that was it. And I think we've stabilized a little bit looking at the numbers.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
So Jeff, on those complaints, how many were accidents?
That's hard to determine without going through each complaint, so I didn't go that deep into it. The three numbers that I do have that capture injuries are the PIORV, and then road and trail crashes, and those average so far this year we're at 6. 2020 we were at 18. 19 we were at 12. And then if you want to look at the earlier years, we were in the 10 and 6. So it did increase a little bit from 15. We're at 6 and it jumped up to 10. I can't say those are all attributed to roadway or the ordinance changes. I really think that we've seen an increase in general in ATVs in the county. It's north to south. And so I don't know that it's ordinance related. Any more than it is availability. And as you can see, the different types that are out there now, they've really made manufacturing of you can find something to fit anything you want to do with an ATV anymore. And so.
The side by sides, I mean, you hardly ever see a four-wheeler anymore.
Right.
On the road. Everybody's got a side by side.
Some of them are huge.
Coffee and every place else.
Yeah. So we do get a lot of complaints on the usage. Again, a lot of them are roadway related because of, going from trails to trails. And the sheriff's office and the DNR, we have, tried some concentrated patrol and enforcement in areas and trying to get people to slow down and stuff, but it's a challenge chasing them around, to be quite honest.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I would guess, yeah, in the last 5 years or so, the side by side has exploded. I mean, big time. It's crazy. But would you think it would be better without this, or? I mean, because we worked with you in the sheriff's department a lot through this, and we kind of thought it would be a good deal. And I don't know if we expected it to explode the way it did, but I mean, most of these, you're gonna have this problem regardless, right? I mean, it does give a law-abiding citizen a chance to use it for good, or.
Right. My take would be it's not a bad thing. So I don't know that we need to eliminate the access. If you want to change some wording to make it less confusing, that's always something that's good to look at and review occasionally, but I don't see any real glaring errors or the things that I would suggest we even fix on it. I think it is sad to say it is what it is, sometimes lame to say that, but I think it is. Other counties, since we've done that, have gone to a similar thing where they've opened up the roadways too. So I think it's more the norm now than it was back in 16. So I don't know that it's out of place.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I remember the discussion when we were doing this, and there was a lot of complaints about property damage, ditches, erosion, things like that. And that was part of the reason we put them up on the road, the ATVs. We had a lot of complaints with, driveways getting tore up, going over, people using the ditches because they were going to go from point A to point B anyway. So, and the other counties that we reached out to said that when they did it, their damage complaints went away. So it's just, and if we're promoting people to come here and use our trail system and stuff, some of it we have to live with, I don't know what that means, but you're going to have people doing things no matter what. But.
Yeah, and I think my biggest concern going into it was conflict with normal vehicles and ATVs, and we haven't seen crashes involving the two of those regularly. Usually it's the crashes we go to are overdriving, speed, or alcohol related. And that, that's just going to go up with the increase of use. So I don't think there's a conflict on the roadway that I would point to being a problem.
That's what I battle every time when people are like, well, since you've allowed these guys are popping wheelies going 100 miles an hour, whipping donuts out. And I'm like, you still have to obey the law. The law, you can't operate it just because you can operate an ATV on the road doesn't mean you can be drunk doing it or anything like that, so, and then people kind of look at you like, oh yeah, you're right. So, I think that's one of the things too, but I don't know.
Mr. Chair, could I just add that?
Yeah.
So our ATV ordinance has nothing to do with side by sides.
No.
So throw that away. It only has to do with those little four wheelers, and that was only to prevent, the ditch erosion and stuff. So they pop them back on. But, as Commissioner Moore said, you have to follow all other traffic laws. You've got to be sober. And our ordinance also specifies that you've got to drive at a reasonable speed and consider the surrounding circumstances.
I think I forgot about that part, Reese. I really did I thought, oh, I got a smaller side by side, and I guess it's considered a class 2, but it's a 570 Polaris, but it's width-wise,
It's likely, yeah.
450 inches.
So, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? So if it doesn't include side by sides, I know that a lot of people get their side by side splicings. Does that mean that they can just drive them on the road, or how does that work?
State statute allows them to ride on the road.
Okay.
They can, yeah.
Okay.
On the right side.
Whether or not
The right side, far right, obviously shoulder if it's available and all that kind of stuff.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
And I think that's where the confusion lies. It is because if you ride on the county road that goes by my house, you have to ride on the road because there's no shoulder. If you get on Highway 61, south of Pine City, there's a shoulder all the way to Rock Creek. You could ride over there. And I don't think the county deputies bother anybody there, but it is, you're supposed to ride for this right. And so when a guy gets pulled over by the DNR officer, they get all, you know,
Right.
that guy's picking it. No, he's following what the law says. So we just forget what the law says.
Right. And that's easy, one of those where, oh, you can ride in the county anywhere now. And
Yep.
so that's what you do. You're right anywhere in the county. So,
I think one thing we talked about is not being involved with the law enforcement or not knowing, but you can't just pull somebody over if you suspect them of doing something under the influence or anything like that, correct? Or can you? Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but that's what we figured. This was more of a, hey, I'm gonna pull these guys over. This is a reason to pull them over and check to see if they're under the influence or something to that effect. So
I don't know that it's fair to categorize every traffic stop as a pretextual stop, which is, you know, conversation in the metro area right now. But certainly if we have a contact with somebody and there's something that expands that stop, that's part of normal course of business. So I think the education piece is huge though. And I think we do a good job of having contacts and lack of better wording, educate them, I'll say. We'll leave it at that. On where they should and shouldn't be without the fine or a ticket involved, just to try to get people into compliance and hopefully they spread the word that, yep, they are doing traffic stops. And I learned that I can't ride down the middle of the road. I have to be on the right. And that, to me, that's the first course of public safety of getting people educated. So again, what it turns into after you get that stop to educate somebody, sometimes there's tickets, sometimes there's arrest and.
everybody's always worried about the taillight bulb being out because they don't want to get pulled over for that. Have you ever written a ticket for a taillight bulb out? Probably not, but
I have stopped people and had conversations about taillight bulbs.
usually it's to lead to something else, I would guess, but I don't know.
Oh, I have a question if I can. How was it missed that it was just limited to the class 1 and not, I mean.
Because
Side by side.
because the side by sides are regulated by state. So state law says if you have a side by side, you can drive it on the right hand shoulder of a roadway.
Right.
And state law says if you have a class 1, the regular 4x4, you cannot be on the roadway and you have to be in the ditch. And then what the state did was they gave it kind of an escape clause that said if you're a local jurisdiction and you want your class 1s up on the road with the class 2s, you can pass an ordinance to do that. And that's what we did here after, you know, the complaints and stuff about tearing up the ditches and the highway department having to go out and spend a lot of money on rebuilding things. So,
And that's where I'm going with that. So
Yeah.
it doesn't stop the side by side if they want to continue to go in a ditch and cause erosion.
That part is confusing, JJ, because it says the entire roadway, which includes any of the right of way. So if like in Sturgeon Lake is a good example, there's ruts probably past your house.
They're fixing now. They're actually doing, the erosion problem went away when they came and fixed. There was language in here for signage that the county could put signs in the ditch. They actually put some lath and it worked. They've been respectful and the vegetation is back. Reason I'm asking with that is several people brought it to our attention with the money and everything that was spent in Willow River now with the reconstruction of the dam. There was individuals that were going up in the dam property, so they actually banned all that. But then the ditch there, the erosion and everything seems to be running right into the river anyway. And if you can stop the class 1 limiting erosion, there's nothing then stopping. If you want to continue to run a side by side, you can continue to go anywhere you want on that right away then, right?
you could put signage or something there. And is that a county road?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there is also, if it's part of an ATV designated trail system and the roadway connects in that already was open to 1s and 2s already. So there are some roads that probably, 46 is part of that trail system out there. So that would pick up 1s and 2s before the ordinance was in effect.
Yeah, Willow seems to be kind of a hot spot now, and especially drawing attention with all the work they did with the dam and everything else. But then from the edge of, the wood line or the back slope, it's running. Oh, it's running in the river, and I guess
People jump up and down to get around the river there.
And, so basically a side by side can go in the ditch if they want.
They can. And again, the city or county maybe should have a conversation about restricting that to keep that from happening because it's going to go into the river.
Well, I mean, to me, if it's working with the class one and helping with the erosion and passing our last ordinance with the no wake zone and erosion on the lakes and yeah, maybe it should be looked at that. Still a problem.
We would prefer they all drove on the roadway. I mean, really, I think it's safer.
And when we first passed this, we had discussed a ditch ban because part of this was just keep everybody out of the ditch. But we were gonna, I think, isn't it written where we can designate certain areas as, and I think where you're talking right in Sturgeon Lake there, that was considered. But if you talk to Mark, I think would be the one to talk to.
Right, and right now it's Willow River. You can, anybody driving home wants to take scenic 61 and check it out or when you're up there. And like I said, the dam's been fixed, but now it's running. And I'm sure Mark does a great job.
Oh, yeah.
When they replace those box culverts, that's why they left that paving. I'm sure they can restore and fix. But it's still
Yeah, we could,
if they want to, they still can do what.
we could sign that and then that would take care of that probably issue.
Yeah, and any other areas, it's just this one has been brought to my attention several times. I was hopeful to just wait when they're there to save money, when you're already doing the box culverts and replacing that, then they can address it.
Dress it up.
I did not know that. You can still drive a
I had forgotten about it, so it's a good reminder. I thank the guy for asking the question because I was wrong. Thanks, Jeff. Budget. The staff has been doing a lot of work. That's to a balanced budget.
I start with the memberships.
Yeah.
So in your packet was a list of memberships that the county maintains associated primarily with the county board. It doesn't include, like the sheriff's association sort of ones. But I just thought I would call those out. I don't think we've ever listed these before, or certainly not in recent years, just to do a check and make sure that they make sense. And a lot of them are budgeted for in different places. So I kind of identified where they show up in the budget. And
my question had been to David and maybe to the board is we've been a member of rural counties for just a few years. Because we thought, we needed some more help from a rural county perspective. $2,500, it's not going to balance our budget, but maybe we don't need to make that decision today. Terry would like to go to one of their meetings at AM. They have a meeting on Wednesday at the AMC conference. I just thought, I think there's one that's not on here that we're not a member of, and it's called the Highway 23 Coalition. And I think that's membership is a couple $100. And it's kind of closer to home.
So what exactly do they do?
The Highway 23 Coalition, they promote the development of commerce through and the build out of Highway 23.
Okay.
And so
we have a lot.
Highway 23 might not be the biggest feeder that we have to our county, but if you ever tried to get off of Highway 61 on Sunday afternoon and take a left and go over the freeway ramp, you'll understand how much traffic goes on Highway 23. Or take a drive sometime from Hinckley to Brook Park on Highway 23. So I just thought maybe that would keep us, because Highway 23 goes all the way through southwest Minnesota. Keep us involved with those counties. But the Rural Counties Association, the last few meetings, they have a lot of counties that have county hospitals. And so they spend a lot of time talking about something that is foreign to me, because we don't have a county hospital. We run our own hospital. And so they do a lot of good things, but.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So, as far as rural counties goes and AMC, we have AMC breaks out into the districts, which really, I think, reaches out to the rural. So are we doubling up on that? I mean, do we feel like there's a benefit to rural counties? Because I don't see it, but.
Well, that's where I'm coming from, Matt. I didn't, in the last couple of years, I haven't seen the huge benefit. I was trying to get them to help us advocate for some PILT a couple of years ago, and most of them don't know what PILT is. So, you know, until they finally got a little piece of PILT money in Brown County or something because of some wildlife management area, then they were worried about it. But I don't know.
I would be fine if we don't, if we cancel that membership myself. That's where I sit. So.
Well, I would even say it like, because you've been on the board or you've been going to the meetings, but maybe Terry, check it out.
Yeah.
See what you think of it.
Join him tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you remember what the 23 was? Was it less than $1,000?
Yeah,
It was cheap.
250 or.
Does this cover the
Under.
all the way up to Duluth?
To Hinckley.
Oh,
To Hinckley.
To Hinckley.
Really.
Okay.
That's the part they're concerned about.
Okay.
Yeah, they gave a presentation about a year or two ago.
Yes.
They came to a county board meeting, remember that?
Yeah.
But we got a little bit of time.
It's probably a bigger concern for Lax County, Canavy, you know, that's their big east-west thoroughfare. We've kind of forget about it here because we got 35 going north and south.
Oh, I take 23 a lot.
Yeah, I do too. I drive on 23 a lot, but I don't get on it in Pine County very often.
Yeah, they want to make it a freeway all the way to 35. That's their goal in the end. But
And being really close to it, I know it's busy.
Yeah, it's busy.
I drive it
And
almost.
maybe
every day.
we're missing the boat there.
Especially right where 35 and 23 come together.
Especially if we start talking about enhancing that freeway exchange to get to properties south of Hinckley.
Yeah.
We might need their help.
Yeah.
And just in the last couple of years, we've had a fair amount of fatalities right there, haven't we? I mean, just right.
Yeah.
We've had some issues in the 35 first few miles.
Yeah, well, I know because we just live off the Wildwood there. And if you're coming west to get off on a busy weekend, like I look in my rearview mirror because people come 65 miles an hour and don't expect you to turn. So, and I'm like, well, I have to take evasive measures. The other day, there was a person on the gravel and I was sitting there and they must have went 65 right around me on the right-hand side and half in the gravel. And like, oof, this didn't look good.
That work is crazy.
yeah, it really plugs up on holidays and fishing, opening and fishing and things like that. So.
Anyway,
It's Fridays.
take a look at it, Terry, on Wednesday.
Yeah, yeah. I know you've been talking about it for a long time.
I don't know, the other ones, you know, AMC is what it is. I think we get a big bang for our buck. certainly Arrowhead Counties has been really where we've turned to for our best lobbying support other than AMC. John Angaro has done us a lot of favors.
All right, that was the easy part.
Okay. Let's move to the harder. Where is
Might not
I
have it.
don't have it.
Yeah.
Did with it. So the bottom line is, after we get all done with this is, we'll go to at some point between now and the end of the month, either today or next Tuesday or at another such meeting, we have to say our levy is going to be this much. And staff will have to work around whatever we say this is it. David has prepared some, things that compared us to our neighbors, which we can take or leave. I'm sure most of us have had that chat with our neighboring county commissioners at various meetings we've been at, and some of the commissioners I talked to yesterday weren't sure that they thought David's numbers were low, where their levy might end up. Mille Lacs County being one of them. They think 9% is not enough. They might have to do 11, which would be a real scary number.
But then you've got like Kneebick, who they're not stepping up to do a lot of things. They're just saying no to things. And then their budget's going up 3%, where we're being more proactive than that also.
Yeah, everybody has their own reasons for doing what they're doing. The Chisago County commissioners I've had meetings with aren't very happy that 5.75 isn't enough for them to meet their obligations. They don't believe. And those are traditionally some pretty conservative board members. They've just been around a while and they know that reality is they need money.
So if we do look at this today, we can set the preliminary levy, right? And then this can. I don't know.
Yeah, is this a posted meeting?
Well, yeah, it's a legal meeting.
We might be, we could say a number today and then officially set it on Tuesday.
Yeah, I would look at Reese as I say this. We put on the agenda, discuss preliminary levy amount.
Okay.
And so a special meeting can only do what the agenda says you were going to do. So I think the safest course would be have whatever discussion you want, but next Tuesday, at the regular meeting, they actually set.
I think we could certainly have a pretty firm number and then come back next Tuesday and ratify it, so to speak. I keep this sheet wherever it is. But I'd like to know what the difference between 3% and 4% increase does for my taxes or my neighbor's taxes.
Those are your neighbors, right?
I have the same, yeah, I have the same question. And where does that put our tax rate if we say 4? I can't remember.
It's over 60%.
0.233%.
0.233. So
Is it more?
if we went 3.5, we could, my magic number is always, we've been trying to be 60% and we haven't got there for a while. But that tax rate probably means absolutely nothing to any of our constituents. But it means something to me. It means that we've done our homework and got close. I remember when we were 69% tax rate and 7% tax rate county.
How bad will that hit our reserves if we go to 3.5?
Even be at 3.5 if you got below 60.
I think Kelly
I can play with some numbers.
actual number, what a tax capacity rate of 60% would be.
I think we've done that in the past because that is the real number. The percent means nothing. I mean, the real number is capacity, what the levy is. Always messes with people when you say a 3.64.
If you did 3.6, it would be exactly 60.
Know my percentages a little.
And what's the dollar associated with that?
717,661. So that's
What was the dollar again, Kelly?
717,661.
Thank you.
70,000.
That's a difference of 79,740.
So 80,000, we'd have to do $80,000 more finessing.
So if we look at a 4 with a goal of trying to get it below 60%.
That's a good plan.
Mhm.
We're already at 4.
Well, I think we have to say 4 is, we can set 4 as a ceiling, I think, right?
Yep.
And that when we say 4, we're hitting reserves pretty good too.
You're just looking for kind of a consensus.
Well, I'm kind of looking for, that you feel confident that next Tuesday you can set the preliminary levy. In order to meet whatever target you set, the changes to the preliminary budget have to be acceptable, right? So I put together a laundry list.
Yep.
Some of it is pretty clear and concrete, and some of it is a little amorphous. And you can tell as you go through the list, when you get to, is it number 15? No,
Well,
17. Oh, there's two 17s.
oh,
You get to the first 17. It balanced, well, it was within $500 of balancing yesterday. And then I found an arithmetic error that put it out of balance by about $3,500. And so I just made up this thing called miscellaneous revenues. Because I believe, right, in a $50 million budget, $3,500 you can work that through, right? But with the exception of number 17, number 16 is probably a little made up. The sheriff has always overspent on what the budget for overtime is. So, do we increase the budget? Do we leave the budget? How much, do we expect? We're adding a little bit of staff. That maybe helps, but it probably doesn't help enough. And I think Jeff would agree with that. We're always gonna do on like 15, people are leaving, people are being hired, that changes what the pay is because maybe someone comes in at step 1 versus the top. So we'll always have those little changes until the budget is finalized. The number 15 is a big one, right? Vehicle maintenance is a shortage. We've had conversation on that. Mark asked for $100,000. I'm proposing a $100,000 increase. I'm proposing that. Well, if we make that 75, that 25 helps us get to balance. The purchases, I'm proposing that we take those out of reserves from the general fund. If you look at the levy history sheet, right, this is really, it tells a good story where previous county boards have worked hard to make sure that the fund balance increased to a level that gives some flexibility and breathing room. And so, I'm advocating that, well, now is the time to maybe consider spending some of those reserves. 13 is again, a gimmick of saying, well, we think Kelly and her staff are going to do some ARPA administration. We legitimately can charge that to ARPA. Let's put a number there. Numbers 11 and 12, we are way underspent in 2021, this year. So we budgeted money, we taxed for it, it's in the budget, it's not being spent. So we're going to carry those forward. In essence, those amounts will be spending reserves, but they're spending money that you budgeted this year, next year. So there's a story there. Otherwise, it just builds the reserves, which is a legitimate thing to do, but that's part of the balancing equation. We have this just unfortunate situation on number 10, where the revenue that HHS pays to the general fund is decreasing by about $44,000 because we're vacating the South Pine Government Center. That is a long-term good decision. It's a short-term budgetary issue. I'm just saying, well, if we, in year 1, take half of that from the reserves, it's a one-time expense in 2023. Maybe can adjust the rent that HHS pays in the other facility. I'm looking at Kelly just to make sure she doesn't throw anything at me. Because they're supposed to pay a market rate. Just nipping away, just like looking at the memberships of the board, right? Each department has memberships and training and whatnot. We added some money in the proposed budget. I think we can take a little bit out and be fine. The number 8 is our labor attorney. We never spend all of that money. That's always been just an in case fund. If we take 20 of that and leave 10, we're going to be fine. The evening report.
Remember that was $165,000 in 2008.
But you also have to look that employee morale is way better since the county stepped up.
It's a double good thing.
Yeah.
This board did way back when Edmond Bryant said, we can do better than that.
I remember taking a 0% because of Edmond Bryant, because of the honesty that he came to us with. Makes a difference.
And number 7, we can capture a little admin in that grant that we haven't been. Number 6 is just, a better calculation on the amount of the reimbursement to expect. We moved a lot of funding out of the recorder fund into IT this year. This is pushing a little bit of it back. buying the sheriff radios out of ARPA. And these actually are in the 2021 budget, I think. Is that correct? So I'm getting a yes from Jeff and a,
Well, there was an increase you were asking in the 2022 budget that was noted for
There
radios
was.
as well.
yes, but
But 21 should have had 20,000 in it.
Yeah. And then 15 for
15 was
next
an
year.
increase, so the total.
But in any case, we think we can just save all of that general fund money and use ARPA funds. The budgeting dispatch at 90%, Rod talked about how he does that in the jail because there's always vacancies. We never spend 100%. This just is a gimmick that creates a reduction of $62,000 that we have to come up with. Doesn't decrease the staffing level, doesn't not hire a person. It just recognizes that we, are not going to spend that money. If the stars all align and dispatch is 100% staffed and we overspend the budget by $60,000, I will, at the end of the year, say that was my bad judgment, but it's still okay. The ag educator that I know this has been a really important service that the county has worked hard to get. We're able to save a lot of money by putting it or leaving it at half-time rather than going to full-time. And then we know that Jeff has proposed a lieutenant. It's, an expensive position. And that's clearly the reason why it's on the list is because it's an expensive position we don't currently have. So that's kind of my laundry list. There's hundreds of other ways to get to the same numbers.
Is there anything in anybody's budget that we're budgeting for that we can think we might be able to spend ARPA funds on that we're not presently planning on?
I was excited to see the radios come out of ARPA.
Well, we're gonna do that.
Oh, is it?
We've got that noted.
Yep.
But are there
Excited about it.
computers, are there copiers, are there somethings? I don't know.
We don't think so. And Leslie is conveniently left because she's following ARPA pretty closely too. If there are, those are decisions that we can always make during the year. And we saw the CARES Act guidance change over time. The ARPA guidance will change over time. So there's always the potential that it loosens to the extent that we're able to provide some additional, gives us some additional opportunities to spend on county stuff.
So Kelly, I'm looking 20,000 for the auditor treasurer. Could that be more? Could we take more from ARPA with the time that you and Melissa spend doing? Well, Leslie's back.
Depends on how much time we end up spending. The state auditor is going to want to see, likely going to want to see time track logs.
Okay.
This day I spent 3 hours, this day I spent 2 hours. And so that's an estimate of what it's going to be, but
Okay.
it's the best estimate I could.
Yeah.
And maybe it will be more but it all kind of depends too, like I said to Dave, when we were coming up with that number of how much, as those programs take off, the housing program with Lakes and Pines and the different things that we've got going, how involved we are in that financial side.
Is elections going to kick into time spent for ARPA? We know that it did for CARES Act.
So there is kind of a separate piece for elections. So I guess we could see how that shakes out. Of course, that still has to be handed from the state down to the counties.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Matt.
So I just have a question for last year's budget. I can't remember if we budgeted X amount of dollars for reserves, but I thought we did. And was it a zero last year?
That's correct, Matt. We did not budget an excess of revenue over expenditures.
But
we didn't spend.
If I'm
we didn't
reading
spend
the-
any, right?
if I'm reading the tea leaves right, of course, we're a long way from the end of our audit report for 2020. We will probably end with a increase in reserve funds.
Not very much, but yeah.
Not much, but we'll be in the plus side, won't we, Kelly? Unless the wheels fall off between now
So,
and December.
yeah, that's why I was asking. So we're being pretty accurate with. our
I
budget.
think we've done a extremely good job the last few years of doing accurate budgeting.
I agree.
I think that really helps the board understand that when we put a number down, that's what the number's gonna be at the end of the year. Because we had some years where that didn't happen, and then that becomes compounded the following year. If you went over budget by 200,000 in one department, now you're catching up from last year, and you gotta build that into next year.
I have to say, we have some really amazing department heads
Oh, we do.
back and do what they need to do and to keep that budget going. So thank you to all of them.
Well, so, yeah, so if I can finish, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's, you weren't interrupting. That was good discussion. So I think we're rate, I know we have reserves. I think, what are you at, 27% of our budget, but we have to be able to do business if something crazy happens too. So I don't mind if we spend a little out of reserves this time. But I think I say that cautiously because we have overtime hanging out there that could ding us easy. Because I know how law enforcement is. You can't control that.
No, but we have, if you look at that levy history and see our unrestricted fund balances, we've done an amazing job in the last 10 years of getting ourselves to a position where we can talk with confidence that our numbers are pretty close. And if we have to dip into reserve a little bit, we can.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to make. So I think I like the way this is broke down in that summary by David. So yeah, that looks good to me.
I'm just looking at the levy history. There's one year that it actually, or the fund balance history, and there's one year that it decreased. And I know there was, and that was 2015 to 2016. And I know there was a year where the general fund transferred $500,000 to the highway fund. I wonder if that was the year.
It could be because that's the year they shifted the way the state allowed the highway department to advance their money. Because we used to be able to, when Mark had a project, he used to be able to submit the plans and he got the money up front. And back when you got 5% interest on your money, if you had $6 million worth of projects approved and you got $6 million that you got to put in the bank for a year at 5% interest for a project that wasn't going to happen for 12 months, it was a pretty good deal.
So I don't know that for sure. And I don't know if Kelly, if you're looking that up right now, or if you can, but there may have been a reason why that one year was not an increase in that what really was a very deliberate attempt to build the fund balance. And there were many years where there was an increase built into the budget.
Yes. We were in a hole for a while there with.
Yeah, if highway wouldn't have had those funds, we would have had to borrow money to make payroll.
Yeah.
Too much.
Well, I don't want to end up there again.
I like your idea of with the ARPA to really, I mean, dig deeper and look. I mean, ultimately you have to give it back if you don't use it.
Yeah, we're not gonna give it back.
Right.
He uses.
But I think we,
Or a new set of eyes maybe looking at it or
yeah,
task all of us to look at list of what you need and we can, just for example, stormwater. I think everybody might have been thinking, some people might have been thinking, I always use the phrase stormwater with your city sewers, your curb, your gutter, your pipes, your infrastructure. But one thing we did for up north for the lake, well, stormwater is rainwater, and ARPA, we made it work to help there. I mean, maybe a new set of eyes looking at what we can use ARPA for, or just, completely dig through that as much as we can. Jump on what you think.
I think we all, it's on all of us. We go to conferences, you listen to what your neighbors and colleagues are doing. Some things we don't want to do that they're doing, but sometimes I think you know what I mean.
I think like David said too, it's going to change tomorrow. It's changed so many times already that tomorrow there may be different options that we can use it for that we don't have today.
Just to get it down as much as we possibly can for the levy. My opinion.
Yeah.
Are we okay?
I think we're okay if I can restate where I
Yep.
think we're ending and what my tasks would be going into next Tuesday. If you leave it vague, as in, we kind of think what you've presented is a decent plan to get the budget to balance. And we'll set the levy next Tuesday somewhere between 3% and 4%, then I probably won't do anything. If you say, we are going to maintain, for example, if you say, we really want to maintain the levy tax capacity rate at 60%, which means the increase is 3.6%. We want to see a budget balance at that increase, then that will be our direction for next Tuesday. Does that make sense? I mean, without some specific target, we're just moving chairs
Right.
on the Titanic. With a specific target, we can say, this will do it. This will make it work at that amount. Whether it's 3.6% or 3% or 4%, or you name the number. But that's the direction I'm looking for. But there's no question in my mind, if you're generally comfortable with what's on the table right now, that the levy in that 3.5-ish range, right, is workable.
It is in my mind. But
The 3.6, is that what you're thinking?
just because I got that block in my mind.
I was between the 3 and the 4 too, so that's right where I was right in that area.
I know if I tell my neighbors we're levying for a 60% tax rate, I could just as well tell them some nuclear physicist formula, because it never meant anything to me until I worked with budget. But it is important, I think. If you listen to the people in Aiken County, that's what they shoot for, but their tax rate's like 37%. So they live in a dream world, the rest of us.
You remember those years here where you were working hard to build the reserves and Aiken spending their reserves?
Yeah.
And they have spent their reserves now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're feeling that.
They've caught up to us. I mean, they have. They still have a lot of high value homes, so their tax rate is still a lot lower. And we can't change that.
Leslie can't.
Oh. Yeah, we're working on changing it. We have changed it. We've changed it almost 10 points, our tax rate.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
we have to remember that the public expects a certain level of service from the county too.
Right.
And I don't think we have much fluff in this. It's pretty much just the basic services, so.
that's good to remember, Matt. I remember telling where my office was in the school, telling the administration there, you can really save a lot of energy. Just turn the thermostat if you want to 45 degrees. And,
Thank you for bringing that up. So one of the comments that I've heard the most out of all the years that I've worked here, and this was even here at a meeting the other day, was why are our lights on all the time? Why are there so many lights on? What is the electric bill like? Is that something that we can cut back?
We can work, we have a lot of lights that are on automatic motion sensors. And some of them are defective, so they always are on.
Okay.
And so it's a constant replacement process. And then a lot of them are just switches that people just turn on and it needs to be turned off. I mean, in the final analysis, that probably doesn't impact the budget to a great extent because so much of our electric is generated by the mechanical systems, the air conditioning, the pumps, the really intense electrical stuff, not the electricity, because almost everything is pretty high efficiency light bulbs.
I heard that so often. Every time you drive by, it's blazing.
they don't have Becky Holland walking through the house. Why do you
That's me.
keep those lights on?
That's me. I'm the one that pays the bill. I shut them off. Yeah.
And this building is hardwired where these lights that rim the overstory are on a light sensor. So when it's dark outside, they turn on. Why, but they weren't on when I got here this morning, and they usually are. So I don't know if there's-
Maybe somebody cut that wire.
Becky came.
Well, are we okay for next Tuesday?
At
Yeah.
3.6.
So that'll be about $80,000 of more stuff that we have to find, which, it's certainly doable.
I don't know if Kelly agrees.
It's easy for us, Kelly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the reality is that there's not really a hard cut on any of this list, right? We're not eliminating positions, we're not eliminating services. We're playing with the numbers to get them to work. And whether the budget is whether the levy increase is 3.6% or 4%, that's probably what we're doing. We're making the numbers work. We're not cutting services. Which if you want to cut services, that's a different conversation. If you go below 3, right, that's clearly the conversation. Or you'd have to start using things that were really, you couldn't with a straight face pass off as good budgeting.
Yeah, we've been pretty careful to budget in reality, I would call it. So. Any other business before we have to, how do we do this? We got to close this meeting?
Yes, and so, because I know there's some staff, although most everyone has left, but I think Jeff is interested, and Terry had a conflict, so he might join remotely, and Becky was gonna try to join remotely, but anyways, we set it up. So we were gonna try to not have to leave this room, and Ryan was gonna work miracles on the technology.
Thank
so
you,
that
Leslie.
Matt would exit this meeting and then join the other link that I sent. Matt, are you there? You look like you're frozen.
No, I'm here.
Okay, so if you want to close the meeting, if you look at the agenda sheet, there's a proposed motion. You'd close the meeting by an affirmative vote, and then Matt, you would exit this Zoom meeting, join the other link, and then we do the closed meeting. And then Ryan would do the change to put us back into the meeting Zoom. But the purpose of putting it at the end was so that there's no expectation that there's going to be any public or that there's going to be any decisions required at this point that would have to be made in public. So
I need a motion to go into closed session this week.
I move to go into closed session as allowed by Minnesota statutes 13D.05. Sub 3B, attorney-client privilege to discuss the case Pine County versus Purdue Pharma LP. ETAL number 19 CV 01907.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
I was digging all over to
Any
find it.
discussion?
Do we get a 2-minute break?
Debbie, can you call the roll?
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District, excuse me, District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren.
Aye.
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
All right.
Thank
How
you.
much time are you giving me to move and flip here? 2 minutes?
I heard a request for a
Quick break.
break over here.
2-minute break. Stretched into 3. Are we back on? Ryan? Can officially hear.
Deb, can you hear us?
Deb? You're muted.
I'm here.
Okay. All we're gonna do is adjourn, I believe. No other business come before the board. Declare the meeting adjourned.